The night my son-in-law looked my daughter in the eye and snapped her bank card in half at her own birthday dinner, his mother raised her glass and said, "Finally, someone is teaching her discipline." The table went quiet. My daughter stared at the broken pieces of plastic as if they were bones. She did not cry. She did not protest. She folded her hands in her lap and whispered, "You're right. I spend too much." And in that moment, sitting in a dining room in Mississauga decorated with streamers and a cake no one would eat, I understood with absolute precision what had been done to my child. If I lost control now, they would win. And I began planning the most important intervention of my entire life. My name is Pauline Dwyer. I am 63 years old. I live in a small house in Burlington, Ontario, about 40 minutes west of Toronto, depending on how the QEW treats you that day. The neighborhood is the kind where people shovel each other's driveways in January and leave zucchini on your porch in August without asking. It looks peaceful. Most places do, from the outside. For 31 years, I worked as a forensic accountant for one of the largest firms in the country. My specialty was tracing money that did not want to be found. Shell companies, layered trusts, offshore accounts disguised as charitable donations. I spent my career following numbers through mazes built by people who believed wealth made them invisible. It never did. Numbers do not lie. They simply wait for someone patient enough to read them. I never imagined I would use those skills to save my own daughter. My daughter Nora turned 31 that spring. She was the kind of woman who remembered everyone's coffee order and still managed to be the sharpest person in any meeting. She worked as a social worker in Hamilton, specializing in housing for women leaving shelters. The irony of that would not become clear to me until much later. She believed everyone deserved a safe place to land. She fought for it every single day, and she never once thought she would need someone to fight for hers. She married Derek Faulkner 3 years earlier. They met at a fundraiser in Toronto. He worked in commercial lending at one of the big banks, the kind of position that came with a good salary, a company car, and a confidence that filled every room before he did. He was tall, well-dressed, articulate. He knew how to listen just long enough to make you feel heard. His mother, Marianne, had raised him alone after his father left when Derek was 9. She reminded people of this constantly, not as vulnerability but as credential. She had sacrificed everything, she said, and she expected the same loyalty in return from everyone who entered her son's life. The birthday dinner was Nora's idea. She wanted something small, family only. She cooked everything herself, which I found strange because Nora used to joke that her smoke detector was her kitchen timer. When I arrived, the apartment smelled like roasted garlic and anxiety. Nora hugged me at the door, but her grip was too tight and too brief, the kind of embrace that asks for something it cannot name. She was wearing a high-collared blouse despite the warm May evening. Her hair was pulled back in a way that looked less like a choice and more like a correction. Derek greeted me with a handshake and a smile that did not reach his eyes. Marianne sat at the head of the table, which was not hers to claim, and surveyed the room like a woman inspecting a property she already owned. Dinner moved slowly. Safe subjects, the Raptors' playoff chances, a new condo development near the waterfront, whether the 403 would ever stop being under construction. Marianne dominated the conversation. She had opinions about everything, delivered with the certainty of someone who had never been corrected and did not intend to start accepting it now. She spoke about discipline often, how young women lacked structure, how modern marriages failed because wives forgot their responsibilities, how her generation understood sacrifice. Nora said almost nothing. She served. She cleared. She refilled glasses before they were empty. At one point, she reached for the salt, and her sleeve rode up just enough for me to see a bruise, the color of a storm cloud wrapped around her forearm. She pulled the fabric down immediately, Our eyes met for less than a second. Hers were not frightened. They were exhausted. Then the card. Nora had mentioned earlier that week she wanted to buy a new winter coat. Nothing extravagant. The old one had a broken zipper and she had been making do. When she brought it up casually at dinner, Derek reached into his wallet, pulled out her debit card, the one linked to their joint account, and broke it cleanly in two. He did it calmly, the way someone might snap a pencil. No anger, no raised voice, just a quiet assertion of absolute authority. "You don't need a new coat," he said evenly. "You need to learn what matters." Marianne lifted her wineglass. "Finally," she said, "someone is teaching her discipline." Nora stared at the broken card. Her lips moved slightly, rehearsing something she had been told to say. "You're right. I spend too much." She had not spent too much. "I knew that, because I am a woman who reads numbers the way others read faces." But the truth did not matter at that table. What mattered was control. And control had already won every seat in the room except mine. I did not react. I did not argue. I memorized everything. The date, the time, the witnesses, the bruise, the broken card, the toast. Because I had spent 3 decades learning that evidence collected calmly is the only kind that survives. And sitting at that table, watching my daughter apologize for wanting a winter coat, I made a decision I did not speak aloud. I would take apart everything they had built around her, quietly, completely, and by the time they understood what was happening, it would already be too late. Before Derek, my daughter did not ask permission to exist. Nora grew up in a house where disagreement was not a sin. Her father, Rais, was a high school history teacher in Burlington who believed the dinner table was for debates, not silence. He challenged Nora on everything, not to break her down, but to build her up. When she was 11, she argued with him for 45 minutes about whether Canada should abolish the... She carried that confidence into everything. At 16, she organized a petition to save a community garden the city wanted to pave over for parking. At 22, she graduated from McMaster and walked straight into social work because she believed systems could be changed by people who refused to look away. She was not soft. She was precise in her compassion, a woman who could hold someone's grief without drowning in it. When Ray died of pancreatic cancer 4 years ago, Nora did not collapse publicly. She organized the funeral, handled the estate, and returned to work within a week. But grief does not operate on schedules. It waits in quiet rooms. It softens boundaries you did not know you were guarding. It makes you reach for warmth without checking whether the hand offering it is safe. Derek appeared 6 months after the funeral. He was attentive in exactly the way grief demands. He remembered the anniversary of Ray's death. He asked about her work without interrupting. He told her she was extraordinary, in a voice that sounded like it meant something. Later, I would understand that his attention was not generosity. It was reconnaissance. At first, the changes were invisible. Nora stopped wearing her father's watch, the old Seiko Ray wore every day of his teaching career. Derek said it looked dated. She stopped going to her Thursday evening book club. Derek said those evenings were the only time they had together. She stopped calling me on Saturday mornings. Derek said weekends should be for their family, not her old one. Each suggestion arrived wrapped in reasonableness. Each one removed a small piece of who she was. By the time I noticed the accumulation, Nora had already begun speaking in his vocabulary. "Derek thinks," she would say, instead of "I think." Derek prefers replaced "I want." She used the word "we" the way hostages use the word "fine." Marianne accelerated the process. She visited every Sunday. She commented on the state of the apartment, the quality of the meals, the way Nora dressed. She spoke as if offering wisdom passed down through generations of successful marriages. "A wife's job is to make her husband's life easier," she said once, while Nora scrubbed a pot that was already clean. "Everything else is selfishness." Nora absorbed it. She absorbed it because grief had opened a door she had not yet learned to close. And these people walked through it carrying furniture they called love. The financial control began subtly. Derek suggested combining their bank accounts for simplicity. He took over the bills. He set up alerts on their joint credit card so he received notifications for every purchase Nora made. She told me this casually one afternoon, as if it were normal. "He's just organized, Mom. He's good with money." I said nothing at the time. But I noted it, because I am a woman who spent her life watching money become a weapon. And I recognized the pattern, the way a doctor recognizes a cough that does not belong to a cold. Within a year, Nora had no credit card in her own name. Her paycheques went into the joint account Derek controlled. She asked him before buying groceries. She carried a small amount of cash he gave her weekly, like an allowance handed to a child. When I offered to take her shopping for her birthday, she said she needed to check with Derek first. That sentence ended something in me. Control does not arrive with a warning label. It moves in slowly, rearranges the furniture, and by the time you notice, you are living in someone else's house. After the birthday dinner, I did not sleep. I sat at my kitchen table in Burlington with a cup of tea that went cold and a legal pad that filled with notes. I wrote down every detail I had observed over the past 3 years. The bruises she hid, the accounts she lost access to, the friendships that evaporated, the way she flinched when her phone buzzed, the way she checked with Derek before answering even the simplest question. I did not call the police that night. Not because they would not listen, but because I needed more than a mother's suspicion. I needed evidence that could not be argued away by a man who wore a suit to work and donated to the United Way. For 2 weeks, I watched. I visited Nora when Derek was at the office. I asked casual questions and listened not to her answers but to her silences. I noticed she no longer had access to their online banking. I noticed she did not know the balance of their joint account. I noticed she could not name a single bill she paid directly. She had become financially invisible in her own marriage. Then I began to dig. Carefully, professionally. The way I had done it for 3 decades. I started with public records. Property titles, corporate registrations, court filings. What I found in the first 48 hours made my stomach tighten. The house they lived in, the one Nora believed they owned together, was registered solely in Derek's name. Her name did not appear anywhere on the title. The down payment had come from Nora's inheritance, the money Ray left her, nearly $90,000. It was gone, absorbed into a property she had no legal claim to, but that was only the surface. Derek had opened 3 credit cards in Nora's name without her knowledge. 2 were maxed out. The 3rd carried a balance that would take years to clear. Her credit score, once spotless, had been gutted. If she ever tried to leave, she would leave with debt she did not create, no savings she could access, and no home she could claim. Marianne's name appeared on a numbered company linked to Derek's business dealings. Money moved between accounts in patterns I recognized immediately. Patterns designed to obscure ownership and inflate perceived wealth. This was not carelessness. This was architecture. Derek had not just controlled my daughter's daily spending. He had systematically dismantled her financial identity while building his own on her foundations. I sat in my home office staring at spreadsheets until my eyes burned. And I understood something that changed everything. Nora could not simply leave. If she walked out tomorrow, she would walk out with destroyed credit, no assets, and debt that would follow her for a decade. He had built a cage out of numbers. And numbers were my language. The night I showed Nora the documents, she sat on my couch in Burlington and did not speak for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock, afraid that silence meant she would choose to go back. She held the printouts in her lap, the credit cards she never applied for, the property title missing her name, the inheritance that had vanished into a mortgage she did not control, the numbered company with Marianne's signature. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I know. He told me everything was taken care of. He said I didn't need to worry about money. That was the point." She looked at me then, and I saw something shift behind her eyes. Not anger. Not yet. Recognition. The kind of recognition that comes when you finally see the shape of the room you have been standing in and realize it was never built to keep you safe. It was built to keep you still. "What do I do?" she asked. "You let me help," I said, "and you do not tell him anything has changed." For 3 weeks, Nora went home every evening and performed the role of a compliant wife, while I assembled a case that would dismantle everything Derek and Marianne had constructed. I contacted a family lawyer in Toronto who specialized in financial abuse. I filed formal complaints with the credit bureaus regarding the fraudulent cards. I compiled documentation that would make any forensic accountant weep with its precision, not because it was complex, but because it was so deliberately cruel. Then the counterattack began. Marianne called me on a Tuesday evening. Her voice was pleasant, controlled, the tone of a woman accustomed to managing situations. "Pauline," she said, "I think we should talk about Nora's mental health." I said nothing. "She's been acting strangely. Distracted. Emotional. Derek is worried. We're all worried. I've been looking into facilities. Somewhere she could rest. Somewhere quiet." The word facilities landed like a stone in water. I understood immediately. They were going to frame Nora as unstable. If her credibility was destroyed before she could speak, no one would believe the financial evidence. It would become the ravings of a troubled woman and her overbearing mother. 2 days later, Nora was called into a meeting at her workplace. A complaint had been filed, anonymously, suggesting she was emotionally unfit to work with vulnerable clients. Her supervisor, visibly uncomfortable, asked her to take a voluntary leave of absence while the matter was reviewed. The language was careful. The implication was not. Nora came to my house that night shaking, not from fear, from fury. "They're trying to erase me," she said. "Yes," I replied. "They are. What do we do? We move faster." The message arrived on a Thursday morning. Not at 2 in the morning like a thriller, but at 7:15, between my first and second cup of coffee. It came from an email address I did not recognize, but the subject line stopped me cold. It read, "Ask about Oakville." Inside was a single paragraph from a woman named Sandra, who identified herself as Marianne's former bookkeeper. She had worked for the Faulkner family for 6 years before being let go abruptly after raising concerns about certain financial transfers. She had kept copies of everything: tax returns that did not match declared income, transfers routed through the numbered company to avoid disclosure during Derek's divorce from his first wife. A pattern of asset concealment that stretched back over a decade. His first wife, Nora, did not know Derek had been married before. Marianne had told her Derek had never found the right woman until Nora. Sandra's records told a different story. Derek's first wife, a woman from Oakville, had left the marriage after 2 years. The divorce settlement was sealed. Sandra did not have the details, but she had something else. A letter from the first wife's lawyer alleging financial abuse, coercive control, and the systematic destruction of her client's credit and assets. The letter described a pattern so identical to what I had documented with Nora that I had to read it twice to confirm it was about a different woman. This was not an accident. This was a method, tested, refined, repeated, Sandra agreed to meet me at a coffee shop in Oakville. She was a small woman with steady hands and a voice that did not waver. She told me Marianne had overseen the entire financial structure. She selected the targets. She engineered the isolation. She taught Derek how to present himself as generous while hollowing out his partner's independence. When the first wife tried to fight back, Marianne orchestrated a campaign to discredit her so thoroughly that she eventually settled for almost nothing, just to make it stop. She called it protecting the family, Sandra said quietly. But what she meant was protecting the money. Derek was just her instrument. She handed me a USB drive containing 7 years of records. Then she said something I will never forget. I should have spoken sooner. I knew what they were doing. I told myself it wasn't my business. But you don't get to watch someone disappear and call yourself innocent. I drove home along the QEW with the USB drive in my coat pocket and a clarity I had not felt in months. This was no longer about a difficult marriage. It was about a system, a machine built by a mother and operated by a son, designed to consume women who trusted too easily and discard them when they had nothing left to give. And now I had the blueprint. We moved on a Monday. I chose Monday because Derek had an early meeting at the bank and Marianne had a hair appointment she never missed. Nora packed one suitcase while I waited in the car with the engine running, not because we were in danger, but because I wanted her to feel the momentum of leaving. Every minute she spent in that apartment risked a change of heart, and I could not afford hesitation. She walked out the front door at 8:47 in the morning carrying a bag, her work laptop, and the ceramic mug her father had given her the Christmas before he died. She did not look back. By noon, her lawyer had filed for divorce, a restraining order, and an emergency motion to freeze the joint accounts. By 2 o'clock, the credit bureau complaints had been escalated with supporting documentation. By 4, Sandra's records were in the hands of a forensic specialist who confirmed what I already knew. Derek and Marianne had committed fraud. Derek called Nora 16 times that evening. She did not answer. Marianne called me once. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was calm, measured, almost amused. Pauline, you're making a mistake. This will embarrass everyone. Nora will come home when she calms down. She always does. She always does. That phrase told me everything. Nora was not the first woman Marianne had expected to return. She was simply the latest. The family court hearing took place 6 weeks later in a windowless room in Brampton that smelled of recycled air and old files. Derek arrived in a navy suit with a lawyer who spoke in paragraphs designed to say nothing. Marianne sat behind him, rigid, her face arranged in an expression of wounded dignity. Nora sat across from them. She was thinner than she had been, but her posture was different now. Not the careful stillness of a woman trying to be invisible, the deliberate composure of a woman who had decided to be seen. When the judge reviewed the financial evidence, the fraudulent credit cards, the misappropriated inheritance, the property title, the numbered company, the pattern established through Sandra's records and confirmed by the first wife's sealed file, the room shifted. Derek's lawyer asked for a recess. It was denied. Nora read her statement without looking at Derek. She spoke about the weekly allowance, the broken bank card, the alerts on every purchase, the nights she sat in the parking lot of a grocery store trying to calculate whether she could afford milk without triggering a notification. She spoke about the bruise on her arm and the way Marianne taught her to dress so no one would see it. She spoke about the isolation, the friends she lost, the career she nearly destroyed, the inheritance her father left her that was stolen before she knew it was gone. She did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She stated facts the way I had taught her, calmly, precisely, with documentation for every claim. When she finished, Derek whispered to his lawyer, His lawyer said nothing. Marianne stared straight ahead as if the wall behind the judge contained something only she could see. The court granted the restraining order. The divorce proceedings moved forward with full financial disclosure mandated. Derek was referred to the RCMP Financial Crimes Unit for investigation of the fraudulent credit applications. Marianne's numbered company was flagged for audit. 3 months later, Derek pleaded guilty to 2 counts of identity fraud and 1 count of unauthorized use of a financial instrument. He received a conditional sentence and was ordered to pay full restitution. Marianne was named as a co-conspirator in the civil suit. Her assets were frozen pending investigation. Nora stood outside the courthouse on a cold October afternoon, the kind of day where the sky over the GTA is the color of wet concrete and the wind comes off the lake like it has something to prove. She pulled her coat tighter. One she bought herself, with money from an account only she controlled. "It's over," she said. "The hard part is," I agreed. "What comes next is yours." 4 years have passed since that birthday dinner in Mississauga. The night a bank card was broken in half like a promise, and a woman raised her glass to cruelty as if it were a toast. Nora lives in Hamilton now, in a small apartment near Gage Park. The windows face east, so mornings fill the rooms with light before she even opens the curtains. She went back to work, not to the same position, but to something better. She runs a pilot program that helps women leaving abusive relationships rebuild their financial identities. Credit repair, bank account setup, budgeting workshops held in community centers and church basements across the city. She named the program Own Your Name because she said the first thing she lost was the right to sign for herself. She cooks again. Not because anyone expects it, but because she discovered she actually enjoys it when no one is grading the result. She calls me on Saturday mornings, and sometimes those calls last an hour and sometimes they last 5 minutes, and both are fine. She adopted a cat named Raymond after her father because she said the apartment needed someone who was quiet and stubborn and always right. I did not argue with the comparison. She is seeing someone. A teacher from Dundas who coaches girls' hockey on weekends and once drove 40 minutes in a snowstorm to bring her soup when she had the flu. The first time they disagreed about something, he paused, thought carefully, and said, "I think you might be right. Let me think about it." Nora told me she almost cried, not because the moment was dramatic, but because it was so ordinary. That was what safety felt like. Not the absence of conflict, the presence of respect. As for me, I wrote this story because silence is comfortable, and comfort is dangerous when people are still being hurt. After Nora's case became public, I received letters, emails, messages from women across Canada and beyond. Some were from women currently being controlled and did not know there was a name for it. Some were from mothers who had watched their daughters change and did not trust their own instincts. Some were from women who had already left and wanted someone to know they had survived. One letter came from a woman in Winnipeg who wrote, "I read about your daughter and I looked at my own bank statement for the first time in 4 years. My name isn't on anything. I didn't know until you made me look." She left her husband 3 months later. She is rebuilding. Derek is no longer part of our lives. Marianne is no longer the architect behind the curtain. The system they built did not collapse all at once. It cracked slowly, the way ice breaks on Lake Ontario in March, in pieces that seem small until suddenly the whole surface gives way. Before I finish, I want to share 5 things this story taught us. First, abuse is not always a fist. Sometimes it is a spreadsheet. Sometimes it is a bank card snapped in 2 at a birthday dinner while someone calls it love. Second, isolation does not always mean locked doors. Sometimes it means a woman who cannot buy groceries without permission and has forgotten that this is not normal. Third, the most dangerous lie an abuser tells is not, "I'll change." It is, "You don't need to worry about money." Financial control is the invisible cage, and most people do not recognize it until the door has already closed. Fourth, leaving costs everything and saves everything at the same time. You may lose comfort, status, and the life you thought you were building, but you gain the only thing that cannot be taken once you reclaim it, yourself. Fifth, if you are a mother, a sister, a friend, and something feels wrong, trust that feeling. Do not wait for proof that looks like a headline. The proof is in the silence. The proof is in the change. The proof is in the woman who used to laugh freely and now asks permission to speak. If this story stayed with you, you are not alone. What part of it did you carry? And what city are you listening from tonight? If you believe stories like this matter, leave a comment below. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your voice might be the one that makes someone finally check their own bank statement. And if you are the woman sitting in a quiet room right now, wondering whether what you are living through counts as abuse because no one has ever hit you, let me say this clearly. Control is abuse. Silence is not peace. And you deserve to sign your own name